everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Jumps Show. Thank you so much for all your support thus far on all of our pre-season videos. It really is hugely appreciated. If you haven't yet checked it out, our season preview video was published last week. That is available on our YouTube channel and is most certainly worth a watch. So keep an eye on that one. And of course, the season opener this weekend in all its glory is the Silver Trophy meeting at Chepstow. Now, before we begin, please do remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And comment below with your favourite fancy or best chance for Chepstow this weekend. We'd love to hear from you. And by we, it's not just the royal we, but of course, myself, Jake Price, and Dan Overall. Great to be back once again on this show. Jake, how does it feel recovering from your flat hibernation?
It feels good, actually. Yeah, it's been fun putting up some selections over the last couple of days. Chepstow's a bit of a tricky meeting to get involved in. There's going to be a lot of potential bets. We're going to be talking about a stage where we've got the Friday decks, but not the Saturday decks. So hopefully we can come up with a few on our shortlist that will end up being bets. But you can always find our selections for both me and Dan on our Twitter pages. So make sure you check those out as well.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not ballsy enough to put up my selections on my Twitter page, but definitely go to Jake and Dan's for theirs. Dan, what about you? We had a nice meeting at Utoxeter just to get the kind of heart racing a bit last week, didn't we? It's all starting to come together now.
Yeah, we had a few nice novice handicaps. Say Utoxeter was decent, so we're starting to see some decent types appear. So we're really getting there. And then for some reason we have everyone big up the Ascot Champions Day just as we're starting to get the ball rolling. So the scheduling is always all over the place. But hey, for us, it's purely jumps from now on, and I'd say we'll be looking forward to like Weatherby, Cheltenham October in the weeks to come. So yeah, full systems are go.
Absolutely, yeah. It kind of feels a bit odd this year, doesn't it? A fly in the ointment is Champions Day being so late, nearly in November, a week later than it usually is, 21st of October. But we are fully focused on the jump. Let's talk about first our notable performances that we've put in our Filofaxes from the recent week. Or the last week gone. Jake, start with you. Is there anything that really took your eye over the last 7 days?
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of notable performances, but one that I really wanted to mention was Chapel Green. So he's trained by Lucinda Russell, and he won a novice handicap chase on his chasing debut up at Hexham during last week. And the reason I really want to mention him is because he was a big scopy type who was minded over novice hurdles, rated only 110, and he came into this chase debut, jumped really well, travelled really well, put the race to bed at the last, and he beat a horse called General Officer, who's rated 121, quite comfortably in the end, really. And I think he's the type of horse that I said before the race that I think he's the horse who's going to improve a stone over fences. And he's only been put up £3 for that win. So if he can't go in again off a mark of 113 in the near future, I'll be gobsmacked.
Yeah, I watched that race back. I totally agree with you. I thought he won really pretty easily in the end. And it was worth noting, I suppose, that the favourite that day who came second, as you said, General Officer, was really quite well back too. So they obviously thought he had a pretty big chance of winning, but was made to look slow, I thought, in the closing stages by the eventual winner, your selection. So yeah, definitely want to know, I would say. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, so as always, like we said, Jake and I agree on a lot of stuff normally. And again, he's gone with the ones on the upward curve, and I'm going on the ones who have not even really come that close to winning. In fact, the first one got beat 24 lengths. But I think you can put a big kind of squiggly line next to that because it was not really like he was given much of a chance, and that's Can Do Kid, who was second in what looked like a really competitive novice handicap chase at Warwick, at least before a couple of non-runners, but still looked a decent enough race. Finished second to Nickelback that day, who is quite enigmatic, front runner, sharp track round Warwick on good ground, just got away. And to be honest, Can Do Kid was never really ridden with a chance to win. He was very much ridden with restraint, but jumped really nicely on his chasing debut. I say got beat 24 lengths, but was never asked really to close. And I think once Harry Cobden realised Nickelback had got away, it was very much a hands and heels kind of effort to get him to the line. I think Thurgold's horse actually came upside him to the last, and he thought, oh, he's not even going to get second here. And somehow he's pulled 9 lengths clear of the eventual third. So clearly there was a lot left in the tank. And the handicap has dropped him £2. So this horse is going to be, I think, very well supported next time out in a handicap chase or a novice handicap chase off 1, 2, 3. Very much a horse to follow. And another one in a similar vein, another horse not really ridden with a chance of winning was Fever Dream. He was ridden the 2-mile handicap hurdle at Utoxeter, again on good ground. Look, this horse is just crying out for a step up in trip and fences. It's clear as day. That's what he wants. He drifted like a barge all day in the betting. And we know with Christian Williams runners, when they do win, they tend to be well supported. Was never really given a chance out in rear. was niggled into the race from off the pace, staying on, again, not given a hard time at all. I think he had a one smack after the last, and that was it. It was never really given or wanted to be given a chance, but clearly just wants a trip and a fence, second to down memory lane in a point-to-point. So when he goes over fences on maybe softer ground as well up in trip, keep him on side because he looks very well handicapped.
Okay, really good, interesting angles there, contrasting angles, as you say, Dan, from both you and Jake. I'll keep an eye out for Fever Dream. Hopefully no feverish dreams to be had with him in the future. I'm going to go with, first up, I wanted to talk about a horse who actually finished second. That was Delgany Bobby Blue at Utoxeter, behind Booster Bob, who looks like a pretty smart one for the Whateleys and Ollie Murphy. I'm not going to give this as a notable performance, but keep an eye, because Harry Skelton sort of rode this one into the race very steadily, gave him a lot to do, and then he finished pretty well in the end. I think Booster Bob always had his measure, and when he did come to Booster Bob went away again. But I'd keep an eye on Delgany Bobby Blue. He's still very lightly raced, and I thought it was a really encouraging hurdles debut. But the notable performance I wanted to put up isn't rocket science here, to be honest, and obviously came in that race that was really sadly marred by the fatal injury to I Like to Move It in the 3-runner Novice Chase, eventually won by Chasing Fire. But Pembroke wasn't too far off him, about half a length or a length back in second. And the most notable thing for me, we all know Pembroke was a very smart handicap hurdler last year, reached a very decent level. I always thought chasing might be his game. He's the sort, though, that I think has to be quite delicately handled. And I think we could see that from Harry Skelton's ride. He didn't really want to push him too hard. It was his first start over fences. It was a kind of learning experience for him. And even coming to 2 out, where he was travelling much better than his other 2 rivals, I still felt Harry didn't really want to go for him. And he ended up making a bit of a mistake at 2 out and just lost a couple of lengths, and then made up a length or a length and a half on Chasing Fire towards the end of the race. But in the main, I thought his jumping was pretty good. And given that really good hurdles form, and given the fact that he was clearly being used as a kind of learning tool, the experience, that I think Pembroke is definitely worth keeping an eye on. Maybe he won't reach the top level in novice chases, but he could be a pretty decent novice handicap chaser going forward. So, Pembroke would be one to keep an eye on from Utoxeter.
Tom got his grand annual horse sorted already. Lovely.
Yeah. Do you know what, Dan? You're not far wrong. Like, he's got just that kind of profile, doesn't he? He looks that kind of grand annual type. The only thing for me is that I do think he's a little bit soft. So maybe a Cheltenham handicap chasing loads of runners might not be up his street, but we shall see. Cool. Let's move on then, lads. Shall we, to the big racing this weekend? The first kind of foray into proper national hunt racing this season. As always, it's Chepstow. And Dan, let's come to you first. I know you got some predictions for what the state of the ground is likely to be, and some stats on some trainers as well.
Yeah, the going currently is very much on the good side. So obviously some trainers will be concerned, but plenty of rain is forecast. So the sites I'm using, say 7 mils probably coming on Wednesday, which day we're recording, 17 mils on Thursday, and then 10 millimeters on Friday daytime, with a few more in the evening. So I'm working on the basis of soft ground, very much soft enough to very much inconvenience these summer types. So I'd say keep that in mind. Obviously, it's hard to be 100% sure because, like, for some reason in this sport, it's the only sport you have to be meteorologists as well as as knowing the sport inside out. But I'd say I'd be surprised if we're not talking about ground that's at least on the soft side by the time we get to Friday.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Dan, I can half see you as a weatherman, actually, maybe in the future for the BBC or something. You got the good looks for it, at least.
I mean, if you somehow see me one day turn on and use ITV and I'm giving predictions on the weather, something's gone either horrifically wrong or horrifically well, or like I'm being pranked. One way or another, I think it's unlikely. But who knows? Who knows? I'm open for anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also on that Chepstow meeting, stats have been quite interesting down the years, haven't they?
Yeah, so I was just looking at the past 5 seasons at this meeting. Obviously, it's that kind of time of year where some trainers are ahead of others and some very much target this meeting, as we know. So I looked at the past 5 seasons with runners, or those who've had 5 or more at the meeting. And maybe it's unsurprising that Paul Nicholls comes out on top with most winners, but he's actually got the highest strike rate as well. Like, he's 35%, and he actually outperforms market expectations here. And he's profitable to back blind to SB and Betfair starting price as well, which is incredibly impressive. I think he's had like at least 2.5 times more runners than the nearest trainer to him at this meeting. So while it's kind of cliche that Nicholls gets them ready early and Chepstow does tend to be profitable for him, he actually does very, very well, despite you may think there's a bit of market bias towards his runners just because it's Paul Nicholls. But actually, if anything, here, the market maybe actually underestimates them slightly. And in contrast, you think Dan Skelton tends to get them quite ahead. He's actually got a pretty poor strike rate, just 9.8% in the past 5 seasons, 4 winners from 41 runners. And all of those winners were actually 6-1 plus. So they came as a bit of a surprise to the market. And he's actually, in general, quite unprofitable to follow here, or has been in the last 5 years. So just something to keep in mind with those two.
Yeah, for sure. We'll touch on the first race then, shall we? We're going to talk about that is the Persian War Novice Hurdle on Friday. Grade 2, very, very interesting contest, it has to be said. Captain Teague heads the market for that man, Paul Nicholls, at the moment, and Harry Cobden. And Dan Skelton is second in, so a nice little segue there. Rockhouse, having been so impressive last time. Some interesting horses up against them. Quite a nice big field for this. 9 runners going to post. Jake, come to you for this. First thoughts on the race as a whole, and who do you think is going to win?
Well, I don't think it's the strongest Persian War we've ever seen, but to be honest, with it being so early in the season, it's hard for it to ever be such a strong field. You obviously see a lot of summer types that have ran well over the summer, and they're just going to have a go at grade 2 while the waters aren't as hot as they will be in the middle of the winter. And obviously, a lot of trainers were expecting better ground than it's probably going to end up being. But look, like everyone else, I'm really looking forward to seeing Captain Teague here. He's obviously going to make his hurdles debut in a grade 2. And the last horse to actually win the race doing such a thing was Time Hill. And he was also third in the champion bumper before coming to this race. So there's previous in that. Captain Teague's certainly the best horse to try and win this race on hurdles debut since Time Hill. So I wouldn't have any concerns about stats or anything if you hear anything like that. And yeah, I to be honest, I'd expect Captain Teague to go and get the job done, to be honest, if he's as good as that bumper form suggests. Of the horses that have already run, however, Rockhouse is probably the most interesting. Obviously, Dan Skelton, as we've just mentioned with the stats, doesn't do well here. But he's already come out and won his maiden hurdle. The form's a bit mixed. The second disappointed since. The third has won since. But he did absolutely bolt up that day, so it wouldn't be too much of a concern. And I think he'll just ensure that Captain Teague has to run to a good level to win the race, to be honest. I don't realistically see him good enough, and I don't really see anything else in the field being good enough to beat either of these two. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Captain Teague gets on.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Captain Teague, of course, named after the character in Pirates of the Caribbean, who was the father of Jack Sparrow. So sounds like Jake is hoping Captain Teague will turn up in ship shape for Friday's Persian War. And Dan, come to you now. Would you agree with everything that Jake has just said, that Captain Teague looks the one to be on that bumper form?
Well, on bumper form, yes, absolutely. I wouldn't be in the business of backing hurdling debutants in grade 2s at even money or whatever price he currently is. He was like 6-5 Ante-Post, and we've had likes of Johnny Who come out. So I'm not sure what price he is currently at time of recording, but he's going to be close to that even money mark. Obviously, Jake mentioned the stats regards to obviously Time Hill won this as a hurdling debutant. Fingal Bay also did in the not too distant past. But in general, again, I don't know what's wrong. I've just become a stats guy for some reason. I don't know what's happened to me, but I started just digging into Paul Nicholls' stats at Chepstow. So I may have a problem, or I'm just extremely sad. Either way, you can decide. So I looked at Paul Nicholls' record in this race. So he's won it 6 times since 2007. Unsurprising, given his general record at the meeting and how he tends to target this race. He hasn't had a hurdling debutant running it since 2013. 4 actually did since 2005, so in that 8-year period. There were 3 thirds in 6 to 7 runner races, and Cesar Milan was the last of 7. And they all went off at very short prices. So one was 7-2, there was 8-15, and 2 of them were 13-8. So it isn't exactly new if Captain T gets turned over here. It's happened in the past with Paul Nicholls' short price horses. Obviously, as Jake mentioned, look, if you're talking about potential, Captain T does look to have the most. Rockhouse looks pretty exciting in his own right, but it's not really a betting race for me. I think maybe the one I just caught my eye slightly, I think she may get overlooked slightly, is Della Casalunga. I think just because people are going to look at the trainer and think, who the hell is Clive Boltby Brooks? And to be honest, I had to do a bit of a double take there, but then I had a bit of a dig into it. He's actually got 20% strike rate and way above market expectations as well. I know it's only been in the last couple of years. They bought this mare for 150,000 when she finished second at Punchestown at the end of last season, behind Sandok again. Head of Senior Chief, who beat the likes of Landrake earlier in the season, previously finished close up to the likes of Deeply Superficial, giving her weight. So she actually has a lot of decent form in the book over in Ireland. And I imagine she's a mare as well, so I imagine they're looking at black type for her, and we'll probably have her pretty gun ready for this. Ground won't matter either. I think she was around the 10-1 mark when I looked. So she's interesting at a price and may just get passed over slightly. Price probably does depend if I have a play on her, but it's not a race I'm looking to get overly involved with.
Okay, lovely stuff, Dan. I've got some background information for once on Clive Wilby Rooks, actually, because I went to school with his two daughters.
All right, lovely.
Yeah, I did. He has got, I think, one of the largest, if not the largest, house in Herefordshire that he lives in, and he has been a point-to-point trainer for a while, I think, but is starting to get into the National Hunt ranks proper. And as many of you viewers will recognise, the silks that he carries have been used of Venetia Williams a lot in the past. So, he's a man who knows a lot about racing and a lot about Herefordshire as well. So there you have it. My thoughts on the Persian War. I think it's really fascinating what both of you said about the stats and previous winners. Although Time Hill won this and was the first recently to do so after not having had a run over hurdles and finished third as Captain Teague in the champion bumper, I agree slightly with Dan. I think it does take a pretty good horse to win this on hurdling debut. And considering, for me, there are a couple in there who've shown some decent level of form already. I'd be inclined at the prices just to take Captain Teague on. He's around about 6-5, which you're taking a little bit on trust there for all that his form so far has been solid, very solid. I don't know what you two lads think of this, but I think the fact that Sid Hosey trains way out means that he's a much bigger price than he might otherwise have been. Because if you actually look at the level of his form shown recently, he's scored 3 times in a row, had a nice long break between May and September after winning at Warwick in a handicap hurdle. He came back to novice company last time, and he beat All the Glory, who obviously has limitations, but he's rated 121 easily by 10 lengths from the front. That was a quite emphatic performance, I thought. And if you're taking that literally in terms of figures, he's now been raised to 129, has way out on official handicap ratings. That leaves him a couple of pounds short of some of these, including Della Casalunga. But, he's got that recent form in the book. He's progressing fast. I thought it was pretty impressive last time, beating a fair yardstick. And at 16-1, I'd be happy enough to put him up each way. Hopefully we'll get of course we do have the full complement of 3 places. So, for me, I think way out might be just a little bit underestimated in the market. As I say, if it was Paul Nicholls or Dan Skelton or even Ollie Murphy, he'd be a little bit shorter than he is at 16-1. So, he'd be an interesting one for me. Jake, rest of Friday, it's like, trying to find a needle in 25 haystacks, I think, some of these handicaps. But, a man of your caliber, I'm sure, has got some pretty interesting thoughts about the rest of the card.
Yeah, as you said, it is tough. Since the decks come out, I've kind of narrowed down a few that I like. I kind of swore myself off of veterans races, but I will mention in the opener that I did think that Good Boy Bobby was quite interesting for Nigel Twiston-Davies, who's obviously absolutely flying at the moment. He's had 13 winners from his last 29 runners in 14 days, so 45% strike rate, absolutely flying. And Good Boy Bobby's down from a mark of 146 when he won the Roland Merrick in December 21, and he's now rated 132. So you'd like to think that there's a race in him. He was 4th a couple of times last season in promising races such as Haydock on Betfair Chase Day. So I think he's still got a big run left in him. But as I said, veteran chases aren't exactly my cup of tea anymore. There's just so many possibilities, isn't there? But a good little race. The Novices Handicap Chase as well. I quite like Chianto Classico if he runs. I think that, especially with the rain coming, I think everything looks right for him. He's a point-to-point winner. He looks like a big chasing type, and he obviously won on his hurdles debut at Chepstow last October when beating Henry II and turning him over because Henry II was odds on. So that looks like a decent enough bit of form. He's had wind surgery since disappointing in the Bartlett as well. So I think that he can run well. And the last one I'll mention is Front View in the senior handicap hurdle. I probably won't be backing him. I don't know if enough rain will fall in time for him. But he's now down to a mark of 126, and I just think that he's going to win a race some point this season. But obviously with JP McManus, that's a bit of a guessing game.
Yeah, what is this, isn't it? Comprehensive analysis there, Jake. I'll get in there for you, Dan, because I'm going to make this short and sweet on the rest of Friday. Keep an eye, I would say, for Emma Lavelle's Darasha counter in the opening Veterans Handicap Chase. I went to see her a couple of weeks ago, and she was, full of the fact that last year had been a real struggle for her. As a result, she has come out and said she's got loads of her horses who are likely to be well handicapped, and I think that's been proven so far already over the course of the last week and a half, because her horses are in fantastic form. I think she's operating about a 33% strike rate. And Darasha Counter has dropped almost a stone from where he was in the handicap last year. So just on that alone, her stable form and the fact he could be well handicapped, well, he is well handicapped, we know that, but he could be coming back to somewhere near that level we're used to seeing him being at. I think he's a decent bet in that Veterans Chase at 12 to 1-ish. And the other one I wanted to mention was Chianti Classico. Jake said in the 323. I'm going to go with a horse who I've been ribbed mercilessly by two of my racing TV colleagues and friends.
No.
Josh Stacey and Andrew Blair White over the course of the last year, because he was a horse that I put up as a horse to follow, Pull Again Green. And ever since I put him up as a horse to follow, he has disappointed horribly. But I think I might end up having the last laugh, because he won very easily last time out at Bangor. That was off 125. He's now up £8 in the weights. He's got race fitness on his side, and I can see him going well in that 323 for Liam Harrison, Fergal O'Brien. Maybe the 7-year-old Dan is just starting to learn on the job. It's taken him long enough, but maybe like me, he's just that little bit of a slow learner.
I thought you were going to say Hidden Heroics, but I remembered he's Saturday. I think he's in the 3 mile Handicap Chase of Saturday.
I can't say those two words ever again.
I know he really kicked on after you put him up. I think he beat a horse home last time. That was impressive.
One of the all-time worst shouts. I'm happy to admit it. Yeah.
Don't worry, I've been there and will be there many more times with you. It's and probably some in this episode. To be fair, we all have those moments. I've got a few I'm interested in on Friday. I think Friday's more accessible than Saturday in terms of betting. Anyway, I'll give another shout to a different horse in the Veterans Handicap, even though it just kind of shows you the nature of these races. You can make cases for most of them realistically on old form, but I'll do my best Tony Cavill impression. I did nibble at this one, Ante-Post, got a bit of 7 to 1 about him. That's I Right, a horse who I have a long-standing love for. I just think he's more likely to run his race than most of these. You just say a lot of these are coming in and out of form. They've dropped in the weights as a result, but I Right was still performing pretty much up to his best all of last season. And say, if you look back to his seasonal debut last year when he was second to Sounds Russian, trying to give him £6 on Racing Post ratings, that was his 3rd joint best performance ever. So he's not like he was a horse desperately out of form. He was still running pretty admirably. 4th in the Roland Merrick off 156, was running pretty well in an Ascot Chase even last time when we saw him, and his record first time out is good. And Harriet Graham had a good winner the other day. So I think he'll be pretty much bang there, and he's probably the more likely of any of these to actually give their running. Whereas a lot of other, maybe one it just springs back to form and is 2-well handicap, but I think he'll be bang there. And I think of the last 7 winners, they've all been very, very handy, and that exactly suits his run style down to the ground. In the Mares Novice, there's a horse I'm keen to follow this season called Alfie's Princess. Prices are unknown. There's never been a price for the race, but she was highly tried in bumpers for Sam Thomas. They fought a lot of her. She never really had a clear run last season. Picked up a lot of niggly issues, still shaped pretty well in the listed race at Market Raisin. I think then she went to Aintree on the back of a break and ran pretty creditably. And then in the Seniors Handicap Hurdle over 2 miles, I mean, they're only 8 years old plus. The seniors seems a bit offensive, but Lebowski for Lucinda Russell, she wouldn't have many runners here at all. I think actually this may be her first runner at the meeting in like 10, 15 years or something quite silly like that. So it's interesting she's coming down to run him here. Obviously used to be with Michael Scudamore. Obviously that partnership now being forged to the first run under her name. Only £1 above his last winning mark, which came on seasonal reappearance last season. Really bolted up that day as well, won it very impressively. The wheels kind of went off from there, but I think that was a case of many of the yards runners. Clearly goes well fresh. Any rain will be a positive. And they did enter him in the Welsh Champion Hurdle as well. So I think they know there's a race in him off that kind of mark. And I say there's a lot of kind of more, I'd say, regressive types than him. He's probably one of the least exposed runners in the race. So Lebowski in that 2 mile handicap is another I'm interested in.
Let's move on to Saturday, shall we? We don't yet know who's going to be running officially because declarations aren't in at the time of recording, but we'll give it our best guess. And we'll start by looking at the 310, which is the Happy Birthday Sue Novices Chase, a listed contest, and it's for the Robert Mottram Memorial Trophy. This is a Class 1 over 2 miles, 3.5 furlongs, and Nappers Hill likely to be one of the market leaders for this for Harry Cobden and Paul Nicholls. Yes, you guessed it, that duo once again. Jake, what do you think about this contest? We don't know who's going to line up officially yet, but it should make a decent enough field.
Yeah, it should be a decent enough race, and hopefully it'll be a good bit of form to take going forward. As you said, Nappers Hill will probably make the market, and I'd imagine he'll take a bit of beating if he jumps. Obviously, he won the Silver Trophy last year, turned into a Grade 2 performer over hurdles. is rated highest of these over hurdles as well. So yeah, I think he'll probably take a bit of beating, but the one I'm hoping for a good run, whether that's winning or just finishing a good second or third, is Unexpected Party. Obviously, I mentioned him in my handicappers video, and what I like about it is that Dan Skelton's come out and said that the Paddy Power Gold Cup is probably going to be the aim. So he's going to get an entry for the race anyway. He's currently available around 20-1 in the Ante-Post markets, which I think is more than fair. And yeah, I'm just hoping that he runs a good race, sees out his race nicely. As I said, I don't know if you want to be winning and beating Nappers Hill in terms of handicap mark for the Paddy Power. But hopefully, yeah, as I said, he runs well and can, springboard onto that race in November.
Yeah, most certainly. I'm going to nip in again before Dan. I think Nappers Hill is probably going to win this. I think it's as simple as that. He's got the course form. He's like to make into a very good chaser, I think, and he'll probably make it nice and simple and try and go out in front and under Harry Cogden, jump them silly. I think he's going to be too good for this lot, to be perfectly honest. Keep an eye on Bella Bliss for John McConnell. She's an interesting mare. I think she'll improve this season, whatever she does, and she stays further as well. So, yeah, she'd be an interesting one for me if she turns up, Bella Bliss. She's got a lot to find at the weights, but I think she'll make into a better horse this season. Dan, what do you make of that 310?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I don't really have a strong opinion. As you say, the market's going to form around Nappers Hill, and rightly so. Definitely the most likely winner on everything we know. Say Paul Nicholls will have him ready for this. Outside of that, it's more of a watching brief. Obviously, we don't know who's going to run. You've got the likes of Twin Jets, Scarface in here, Collector's Item, Inch House, Good Risk at all types you think are going to make into probably horses more likely in a handicap down the line. So no betting interest to me whatsoever. Very much a watching brief, probably more for those in behind with a view to handicaps.
Okay, Dan. Well, with that in mind, let's keep with you then, shall we, for the big race of the weekend? That's the Wadsell Group Silver Trophy Handicap Hurdle. Some very good winners of this down the years. What do you make of the contest this year?
Yeah, looks reasonable, I think. Some interesting types in there. I wouldn't say there's too many absolute standouts. I think Sonagino has been heading the Ante-Post market. Obviously, was also I was a big fan of last season. Did improve and showed he's versatile at Aintree when being ridden differently. Obviously, won at this meeting last year as well. So, a lot to like about him. But the one I did like and have liked for a long time is Blow Your Wad. Obviously, I think he's been clearly very talented for some time. It's just taken a long time to iron out a lot of his quirks. As a bumper horse, he was just short of top class. He was learning very much as he went on over hurdles, second on Hurley debut, won next time out in a lesser race, and was highly tried thereafter. I think the combination of wind up and stepping up in trip at Newbury and maybe just finally learning what he's meant to do. Saw him come good in a decent handicap at 2 mile free where he beat Inniston, who was second in the EBF final, which we know is a race that often works out well. Travelled like a dream that day, and he was bang there at the last, and then he started to be ridden. You think he's not gonna go through with this because it's just Blow Your Wad. He doesn't do it, but he dug deep really well to actually pull away quite convincingly the line. Tom Lacey has a good record at this meeting in general. Won this race in 2020 with T Clipper. I think there's a lot to like about him. I think he's 8-1 Ante-Post currently, which I think is a reasonable enough bet.
Yeah, I think Jake, you're in agreement with Dan on that.
Yeah, it's a race where novices, like from the previous season, have such a good record. We've had Nappers Hill last year, Orby's Legend the year before that, T-Clipper the year before that, and Flash of Steel as well. They were all really good novices that still had workable handicap marks. And there's two that in particular that really, I think, come under that category. If for some reason the rain didn't arrive, which obviously looks very unlikely, then I think Lallygag would have a good chance. Obviously, the Paul Nicholls combination. Freddie Gingle jumps back aboard and takes off £7. So if it did stay around good to soft, I think he'd have a good chance. But if it gets soft, which is what we're expecting, then as Dan has said, Blow Your Wad, it looks to have an amazing chance. His mark looks very workable. He was a very good novice last season. I liked what he did. He was fortunate enough to contest grade ones, had his wind up, stepped up and tripped a 2 mile free at Newbury and won that race well. So yeah, I think he's got a good chance. Lacey's 3 from 10 at this meeting as well, so just a little stat to add in there, and I think he'll go well. The last horse I did want to mention though, a bit of a bigger price at 16-1 is Sign From Above. Now I literally have no idea if he's travelling over or not. I think if he does, then they obviously would like his mark of 129. So that may say a bit, but his form's actually working out quite well. He was 4th behind High Definition on hurdles debut, went back to the back over hurdles in the spring, and he placed in a couple of races, but more recently he stepped up and tripped to 2 mile 4 at Navan last month, and that's where he won quite well. Definitely appreciate the step up and trip. And the second has since turned over Koala Phil yesterday, and The fourth also turned over Shannon Royale last week. So they're two of Gordon Elliott's novices that you'd be hoping would be very good this season. So if he travels over, they must like a mark of 129. I'll probably have a little bet on him.
Great stuff. I think three's a crowd because I'm going to go with Blow Your Wad as well. All the
Podcast
same selection
now.
for the Silver Trophy.
Crap.
For all the reasons, Oh, drat. For all the reasons you lads have said, I wouldn't want to add too much. But what I will add is a slightly different angle. Is that I was at Wincanton on the 10th of March, 2022, when Blow Your Wad was beaten half a length by Tamuras, who of course went on to win the Tolworth Hurdle last season. And Stan Shepherd got off, and I interviewed him, and he said to me, well, what I will do is I'll preface it with what actually happened at the end of the race, is that Blow Your Wad led and then drifted markedly, violently to his left and then almost ended up in the hedge and ended up coming second, beaten half a length. And I spoke to Stan Shepherd afterwards, and Stan said, oh, this lad, he's got so much talent. He's got so much talent. He's just nuts. He's completely nuts. So we need to try and iron that out of him. But I think as he's getting older, he seems to be able to kind of protect and nurture that talent, and we're seeing that borne out in the races themselves. So fingers crossed, Blow Your Wad on Saturday. Biggest dangers for me would be Uncle Bert. I think it was very impressive last time at Perth. The Twiston Davis team, as Jake said earlier, in fantastic nick. And Ike Sport too for Neil Mulholland. Be nice to see him get a big winner and a big handicap. A couple of wins recently, and has particularly impressed them at Worcester last time out. So he's got race fitness on his side as well. Jake, what about the rest of the card on Saturday? Anything that's sprung out to you?
Nothing major, to be honest, at this stage. Obviously, Dex will help narrow down the fields, but in the Native River, I did kind of like Man of the People. Two problems, however, the rain arriving, and Fergal O'Brien is in terrible form at the minute. I think he's 0 from 20 in the last 14 days, which is very unlike him at this time of year, and very unlike him at any point in the season, to be honest. So that would be a big concern, but I did think he had good form. He jumped really well, and he's probably a horse to keep on side going forward off a mark of 128. And then in that race as well, if Geoffrey turns up for Gordon Elliott, I'll give him another chance. But I'd say it's probably more likely that he turns up in the Munster National next weekend instead. So that's pretty much it. I will also mention the Ari runs in the juvenile hurdle for Paul Nicholls, and he looks like an exciting type.
Cool. Definitely keep an eye on that one in the juvenile, the first race on the card, 155. Dan, what about you for the rest of Saturday?
Yeah, like Jake, I think Saturday in general is going to be a much tougher betting contest. Some of the handicaps I was staring at for ages and really coming up pretty dry. The 2.5 mile one, I thought Garincha would probably be overpriced. I just think based on a lot of more high profile types in this race, but I think a lot of them will be having bigger targets in mind. Neil Mulholland's actually got a decent record at this meeting. He's had a winner at it the last 2 years. Only had one runner at it last season. That was in the 4-year-old hurdle who won. Garincha's 3 from 6 over fences, had plenty of excuses in the couple of times he was beaten. Won on seasonal reappearance last season as well. And Neil Mulholland in general has been in pretty decent form to start the season. And interestingly, 4 of the last 8 winners of this have been really down the weights. I think they carry 10 stone 4 or less. So something at a big price, carrying a low weight can pop up. And the 4-year-old handicap hurdle, obviously very tough, but I'm a big fan of Affodil. I thought all last season he was going to be one of those juveniles who doesn't just stop being a decent horse at 4. I think he's going to kick on and progress. Really big, strong type, pretty consistent as well. Obviously did go up a bit for winning at the end of the last season, but I think he's a horse they think pretty highly of. They're already looking at the Greatwood with him. So I think he's going to have to run pretty well to justify his position in the race of that nature as a 4-year-old going on 5. They've already compared him to the likes of Oldgard, who actually did win at the Greatwood Hurdle as well. So, and this is a race that Paul Nicholls has won 3 times in the last 7 years. So I think he's got a lot going for him as well.
Excellent stuff, Dan. Yeah, really interesting there. I'm just going to put up one to keep an eye on in the Native River Handicap Chase. If the ground comes up soft, which is obviously possible, French Paradox for me for Oliver Signey and Gavin Sheehan, the best horse in the yard by some distance. And the target is the Hennessy, the old Hennessy, the Coral Gold Cup. Probably needs to get another win in before that. And this looks like a really good opportunity for him. So they'll be going all guns blazing for that. And if the ground comes up on the soft side, he's definitely worth keeping an eye on that £50,000. Good money handicap chase at 230. Okay, gents, I think that leads us to it. Thanks very much for your time once again. Been a lot of fun. And fingers crossed you got some winners in there. It's a big weekend, first weekend. So, trying to get up to a flyer. As always, like and subscribe to the video here on The Jump Show. Really does help us out. And please do comment, because we'd love to hear from you. It's fascinating. And, if you've got any comments on what we've tipped up as well, we'd also love to hear those. So, looking forward to the weekend. Should be a cracking couple of days of racing in Wales. And until next time here on The Jump Show, it's goodbye.